On the night of her birthday, 7 months pregnant, standing in the private dining hall of a Manhattan skyscraper, Isabella Carter was handed divorce papers by her own husband. Not in private, not with remorse, but in front of his new wife-to-be, his mistress, and an audience of New York's elite. The chandeliers above her cost more than most people's homes. The champagne being poured was older than some of the guests. The view stretched across the glittering skyline of Manhattan, a city that worshipped power, money, and status above all else. And in that room, surrounded by billionaires and socialites, Isabella Carter was being publicly destroyed. What no one in that room knew was that the woman being discarded by a billionaire was secretly worth more than every man in that room combined. And the man who thought he had won everything had just signed the beginning of his own destruction. This is the story of the most expensive mistake ever made in the history of New York high society. A mistake that cost one man everything and revealed a secret that would shake the foundations of American wealth. The evening had started like any other celebration in the world of the ultra-wealthy. Isabella had been told it was a private birthday dinner, intimate, just close friends and family. That's what Ethan Blackwell, her husband of 3 years, had promised her. Ethan Blackwell, real estate mogul, tech investor, a man worth $4 billion on paper, a man whose name appeared in Forbes, in the Wall Street Journal, in the business sections of every major publication, a man who had everything, including a wife who adored him. Isabella arrived at the venue in a flowing midnight blue dress, custom-made to accommodate her pregnancy. She was radiant, glowing, 7 months along, carrying their first child, a daughter. She stepped into the dining hall expecting warmth. What she found was ice. The room was filled with people, but not the people she expected. These weren't her friends. These were Ethan's business partners, his investors, his lawyers, and at the center of it all, sitting in the seat that should have been hers, was Vanessa Cole. Vanessa Cole, 26 years old, Ethan's executive assistant, a woman Isabella had trusted, a woman who had been in their home, who had smiled at her, who had congratulated her on the pregnancy. And now, Vanessa was wearing a diamond ring that could buy a small island. Isabella's heart stopped. She looked at Ethan. He wouldn't meet her eyes.
If you want to uncover more chilling true crime stories and see justice exposed, subscribe to Crime Vaults as we bring light to the darkest true crime cases and never miss the secrets hidden in plain sight.
Vanessa stood first. Her voice cut through the room like a blade, sharp, confident, cruel. She demanded an apology. An apology for what? Isabella couldn't even process the words. Something about disrespect, about Isabella supposedly insulting her at a company event. A lie so transparent it was almost laughable. But no one in the room laughed. Isabella refused. She wasn't going to apologize for something she didn't do. Not to this woman, not in front of these people. That's when Ethan stood. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket, cream-colored, expensive stationery, the kind used for weddings and galas. But this wasn't an invitation. It was a divorce petition. He slid it across the table toward her, in front of everyone. His voice was cold, businesslike, the same tone he used to fire executives. "Sign it tonight, Isabella. It's over." The room went silent. Isabella's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Her eyes scanned the document. The words blurred. Irreconcilable differences, division of assets, immediate separation. And then she saw the date. He had filed this 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks while she was planning nursery colors, while she was choosing names for their daughter, while she believed she was building a life with him. He had already been planning her erasure. Ethan continued, "I'm marrying Vanessa. We're in love. We have been for over a year. You and we were a mistake. I married the wrong woman." Vanessa smiled, a slow, victorious smile. Isabella felt the room spin, but she didn't cry. Not yet. Not in front of them. She stood, slowly, carefully, her hand resting protectively over her belly. She looked at Ethan one last time. "You'll regret this." Her voice was quiet, steady. Ethan laughed, actually laughed. "Regret what? Leaving you? You have nothing, Isabella. You signed a prenup. You have no career, no family, no money. You're going to disappear and no one will even remember your name." He turned to his lawyer. "Escort her out. She's no longer welcome in any property under my name. That includes the penthouse. Have her things packed and sent to a hotel." And just like that, Isabella Carter was thrown out into the New York night, pregnant, alone, publicly humiliated. Or so they thought.
To understand what happened next, you have to go back 3 years, to a warm spring afternoon in a Soho art gallery. Isabella wasn't supposed to be there. She had been walking past, saw the exhibit through the window, stepped inside on a whim. She was dressed simply. Jeans, a white blouse, no jewelry, no makeup. Her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked like a graduate student, maybe an art enthusiast, certainly not someone worth a second glance in a city full of wealth and beauty. That's exactly how she wanted it. Because Isabella Carter wasn't her real name. Her real name was Isabella Moreau. And in the circles that truly mattered, the circles that existed far above the flashy billionaires of New York, the Moreau name meant everything. But she had left that world behind, or tried to. She had spent her entire life suffocated by it. The security details, the background checks on every friend, the constant suspicion, the endless parade of men who smiled at her face but calculated her net worth behind their eyes. She wanted something real. So she disappeared, changed her name, created a simple identity, became an interior designer, lived in a modest apartment in Brooklyn, took the subway, bought her own coffee. For the first time in her life, she was invisible, and it felt like freedom. Ethan Blackwell walked into that gallery 17 minutes after she did. He noticed her immediately. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she was looking at a painting he had been considering buying. A modern piece, abstract, expensive. He approached, started a conversation. She had no idea who he was. That alone fascinated him. Everyone knew Ethan Blackwell. His face was on magazine covers. His deals made headlines. But this woman looked at him like he was just another person. She introduced herself as Isabella Carter, an interior designer. He introduced himself as Ethan, didn't mention his last name. They talked about art, about the city, about life. He asked for her number. She hesitated, then gave it to him. Their first date was a walk through Central Park. Their second was dinner at a small Italian restaurant in the village. Nothing flashy, nothing expensive. Ethan fell in love with her humility, her grace, the way she didn't care about his money, because she didn't know he had any. When he finally told her who he was, 3 weeks into dating, she acted surprised, impressed even, but not obsessed, not hungry. That sealed it for him. He proposed 6 months later. She said yes, but she had conditions. She wanted to keep working, wanted to keep her own identity, didn't want to become just Mrs. Blackwell. Ethan agreed. He loved her independence. And when his lawyers presented the prenuptial agreement, a document that gave Isabella almost nothing in the event of divorce, she signed it without complaint. Ethan's lawyers were thrilled. They had protected his fortune. What they didn't know was that they had just protected a woman who didn't need a single dollar of it. Isabella's personal net worth, hidden across trusts and shell companies, was over $1.2 trillion. She could have bought Ethan's entire company with pocket change, but she didn't tell him. She wanted to see if he would love her without knowing. And for 3 years, she believed he did.
The night she was thrown out, Isabella checked into a boutique hotel on the Upper East Side. She didn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the city lights, her hand resting on her belly. Her daughter kicked, strong, persistent. Isabella smiled despite everything. She wasn't broken. She wasn't defeated. She was done pretending. The next morning, she made a single phone call. "It's me. I need the full team. Legal, acquisitions, intelligence, everything." The voice on the other end didn't ask questions. Within an hour, a private car arrived. Not a taxi, not an Uber, a vehicle that cost more than Ethan's penthouse. She was driven to a building in Midtown, a building with no signs, no logos, just an address that didn't appear on any public records. She took the private elevator to the 42nd floor. The entire floor belonged to her family's operation, the Moreau Group, a name that didn't appear in Forbes, that didn't make headlines, because the truly wealthy don't need publicity. They own the things that create publicity. 16 lawyers were waiting for her, financial analysts, private investigators, acquisition specialists. She sat at the head of the table, 7 months pregnant, exhausted, betrayed, but absolutely in control. "I want everything," she said quietly. "Everything he owns, everything he's built, everything he's proud of. I want it dismantled, quietly, carefully, legally. And I want him to watch it happen without understanding why." One of the senior lawyers slid a folder across the table. "We have already begun preliminary research. Ethan Blackwell's empire has vulnerabilities." Isabella opened the folder and smiled.
Ethan Blackwell woke up the morning after the divorce announcement feeling like a king. He had done it, cut loose the dead weight, the boring wife, the woman who had become invisible to him. Vanessa was everything Isabella wasn't. Young, exciting, ambitious. She understood his world. They had breakfast on the penthouse terrace, champagne and strawberries. Vanessa posted photos to Instagram. The engagement ring glittered in the sunlight. The media went wild. Billionaire Ethan Blackwell divorces pregnant wife for young assistant. Scandal rocks New York high society. But Ethan didn't care about the bad press. Controversy faded. Money didn't. His lawyers assured him the prenup was ironclad. Isabella would get nothing. Maybe a small settlement, enough to keep her quiet. She'd disappear, find some small apartment somewhere, raise the kid on her own. He'd pay child support, of course. He wasn't a monster. But that was it. His life would move on. Bigger, better without her. Except, small things started going wrong. Nothing major at first. A deal that was supposed to close didn't. An investor who had committed funds pulled out. A property acquisition that was guaranteed fell through. Ethan's CFO brought him the news during a meeting. "It's strange, these were sure things, but suddenly everyone's getting cold feet." Ethan waved it off. "Market jitters. It happens. We'll recover." But it kept happening.
What Ethan didn't know was that Isabella's team had already been working for 3 weeks. They had started the day he filed for divorce, because Isabella had access to something Ethan never knew about. Information. Real information. The kind that doesn't appear in quarterly reports or press releases. The Moreau Group had intelligence operatives who made the CIA look amateur. Within 72 hours, they had a complete map of Ethan's financial empire. Every loan, every investor, every partnership, every vulnerability. And there were many. Ethan's company looked successful from the outside, but underneath it was leveraged to the breaking point. He owed billions, to banks, to private investors, to foreign entities. His entire empire was built on debt and confidence could be destroyed. Isabella's team began buying his debt, quietly, through shell companies, offshore accounts, entities that couldn't be traced back to her.
They approached his investors, whispered doubts, mentioned financial irregularities, suggested it might be wise to divest. They contacted his partners, offered them better deals with other people, away from Ethan. They didn't need to attack him directly. They just needed to remove the supports and watch the structure collapse.
2 months after the divorce, Ethan's board of directors called an emergency meeting. The company's stock had dropped 18%. 3 major investors had pulled out completely. 2 key partnerships had dissolved. And somehow, no one could explain how, a significant portion of the company's debt had been consolidated under a single entity, an entity that was now calling in the loans. Ethan's head of finance looked like he hadn't slept in days. "We need to restructure immediately. If we can't secure new funding in the next 30 days, we're looking at bankruptcy." Ethan slammed his fist on the table. "That's impossible. We're worth billions." "On paper, but our liquid assets are tied up, and our creditors are demanding payment, all of them, at the same time. It's almost like it's coordinated." Ethan's blood ran cold. "Who owns the debt?" The finance chief slid a document across the table. "A holding company called Archon Capital, based in Luxembourg. We can't find out who's behind it." Ethan stared at the name. He didn't recognize it, but somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered a warning. He ignored it. While Ethan's empire crumbled, Vanessa was spending money like water. Designer clothes, jewelry, a new car every month. She had quit her job the day after the engagement. Why work when you're about to marry a billionaire? She threw parties, appeared at galas, hired a publicist. She wanted to be the next big socialite, the next it girl of New York. But the invitations started drying up. The A-list events stopped including her name. At first, she thought it was jealousy, women hating her for stealing Ethan. But then she overheard a conversation at a charity luncheon. 2 older women, wives of serious money. "Did you hear? Blackwell's company is in free fall. He might lose everything." "I heard. Poor timing for the new wife. She thought she was marrying a billionaire. Might end up with nothing." Vanessa's stomach dropped. She confronted Ethan that night. "Is it true? Are you going bankrupt?" Ethan was in his office, surrounded by papers, his face haggard. "It's temporary, a rough patch. I'll fix it." "How rough?" He didn't answer. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "I didn't leave my career to be poor, Ethan." He looked up at her, really looked at her, and for the first time he saw her clearly. She didn't love him. She never had. She loved what he represented, and if that disappeared, so would she. 3 months after the divorce, Ethan received a letter. Hand-delivered, marked urgent. It was an invitation to an emergency shareholders meeting for his own company. That didn't make sense. He was the majority shareholder. He controlled the company. He called his lawyer. "Who called this meeting?" There was a long pause on the other end. "Archon Capital. They now own 51% of your company's voting shares." Ethan's world tilted. "That's impossible. Those shares weren't for sale." "They acquired them through the debt conversion and through purchasing shares from other investors. It's all legal, it's all documented, and it happened over the past 90 days. "Who is Archon Capital?" "We don't know, but you'll find out at the meeting. It's mandatory, tomorrow, 10 a.m. Ethan didn't sleep that night. The next morning, he arrived at the conference room in his own building. It was packed. Shareholders, board members, lawyers, media. Why was media here? He took his seat at the head of the table, but the chair at the opposite end, the chair reserved for the majority shareholder, was empty. 10 a.m. came. The doors opened, and Isabella walked in. She looked different. Not broken, not desperate, not pregnant and abandoned. She had given birth 2 weeks earlier. Her figure had returned.
She was wearing a tailored black suit that probably cost more than Ethan's car. Her hair was styled, professional, powerful. But it was her eyes that had changed. They were cold, calm, absolutely certain. She walked to the head of the table, to the chair opposite Ethan, and sat down. The room fell silent. Ethan stared at her, his mind racing. One of the lawyers stood. For those who don't know, allow me to introduce Isabella Moreau, majority shareholder of Blackwell Industries through Archon Capital Holdings. Moreau. The name hit Ethan like a freight train. Moreau. He knew that name. Everyone in finance knew that name. The Moreau family, one of the wealthiest dynasties in the world. Old money, serious money. The kind of money that didn't need to show off because it owned half the infrastructure of the modern world. He looked at Isabella. She smiled, a small, sad smile. "Hello, Ethan." His voice came out as a whisper. You're a Moreau?" "I was born Isabella Moreau. I took my mother's maiden name when I wanted to live a normal life, when I wanted to see if someone could love me for me, not for what I was worth." She paused. "You answered that question." Ethan's hands were shaking. "You lied to me." Isabella's smile faded. "I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you everything. The same way you didn't tell me you were sleeping with your assistant for a year before you divorced me, on my birthday, while I was pregnant." The room was silent. Isabella opened a folder. "As of this morning, I control 51% of this company, which means I control the board, which means I control you." She looked around the table. "I'm calling for an immediate vote to remove Ethan Blackwell as CEO, effective today."
The vote was unanimous. Every single board member voted to remove him. Because they weren't loyal to Ethan, they were loyal to money. And Isabella had more of it than he could ever dream of. Ethan sat there, frozen, as his entire world collapsed. His company, his reputation, his identity, gone. But Isabella wasn't finished. She turned to Vanessa, who was sitting in the corner, her face white. "There's also the matter of embezzlement." Vanessa's eyes went wide. Isabella slid another document across the table. "Over the past 18 months, $300,000 has been transferred from company accounts to a personal account under your name. Unauthorized purchases, fraudulent expense reports, theft." Vanessa started to speak, but her voice failed. Isabella continued, "I'm not pressing charges, yet. But you have 24 hours to return every dollar and to leave New York, permanently. If I ever see your name associated with this city again, I will bury you." Vanessa ran from the room. Isabella stood. She looked at Ethan one last time. "You said I would disappear, that no one would remember my name." She picked up her bag. "You were wrong." And she walked out.
The media coverage was nuclear. Secret trillionaire exposed after billionaire husband's betrayal. Isabella Moreau, the woman who destroyed her ex-husband's empire. Pregnant wife revenge, how one woman took down a New York billionaire. Ethan became a pariah overnight, not because he was broke, though he nearly was, but because he had humiliated the wrong woman. In the world of the ultra-wealthy, there are rules. You can be ruthless, you can be cold, you can be cruel, but you never, ever underestimate your opponent. And Ethan had made the fatal mistake of assuming his wife was powerless. He lost his company, his penthouse, his reputation. He was forced to sell everything to pay his debts, the same debts that Isabella's companies had purchased. She forgave them, eventually, but only after he had lost everything else. Vanessa disappeared completely. Some say she moved to Europe. Others say she changed her name. No one cared enough to find out.
6 months after the shareholders' meeting, Isabella held a press conference. She announced the creation of a new foundation, the Moreau Foundation for Women's Advocacy. Its mission to provide legal, financial, and emotional support to women betrayed by powerful men, women who had been silenced, humiliated, discarded.
The foundation's first office opened in Manhattan, funded with $500 million. Just the beginning. Isabella raised her daughter in private, away from the spotlight, away from the chaos. She never asked Ethan for child support. She didn't need it, and she didn't want him to have any claim on her daughter's life. Her daughter would grow up knowing her mother was strong, independent, unbreakable, that she didn't need anyone to save her, because she had saved herself. As for Ethan, he rebuilt, slowly, a fraction of what he once had. He remarried, a quiet ceremony, a woman who actually loved him. But he never forgot. Every time he saw Isabella's name in the news, and it appeared often, associated with philanthropy and power, he remembered. The night he handed her divorce papers, the night he thought he had won, the night he had actually lost everything. Because he thought he divorced a powerless, pregnant woman, but in truth, he had just declared war on the richest woman on earth, and never even realized he had already lost. If you want to uncover more chilling true crime stories and see justice exposed, subscribe to Crime Vaults as we bring light to the darkest true crime cases and never miss the secrets hidden in plain sight.